Did you know that there are more living things, more living organisms in a spoon of soil than there are people on Earth? That's quite an interesting fact. But with all these living things that we are talking about that can be found in a spoon of soil, we can actually not discuss all the possible living things that we have. So we'll only be discussing a few, like the ones you see on the screen. So for this lesson, we'll actually be grouping the living things that we have on the screen into two categories, and then we'll pick each of them and explain it into detail. So stick with us to the end of this lesson. Now on the screen we have a tree, a flower, goat, rabbit, eagle, lion, and bear. These living things can actually be categorized into two. We have the producers and the consumers. So you can see clearly that on this screen, the plants are the producers and the animals fall under the consumers category. But why are plants referred to as producers? Why? You see, a producer is a living thing that is able to make or produce its own food using basic or raw materials. So if you look at this screen right now, an example of a producer is a plant. So plants are able to use raw materials like carbon dioxide and water. And then with the help of energy from the sun, they're able to convert these raw materials into glucose or sugar and oxygen. So how does that happen? Look at this video. So the plant absorbs water from the soil through its roots, and then this water is combined with carbon dioxide, and with the help of energy from the sun, these raw materials are converted into glucose or sugar and oxygen. So how does that happen? We have water from the soil, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then energy from the sun is used to convert these raw materials into what? Glucose. So this is a word equation of photosynthesis. So the process I've just described, the process whereby plants are able to make their own food using water and carbon dioxide with the help of sunlight, is photosynthesis. So the word equation of photosynthesis is water plus carbon dioxide gives us what? Glucose and oxygen with the help of energy from the sun. So because plants are able to do this, to produce their own food from these raw materials, that is why they are referred to as producers. Actually, aside photosynthesis, there is also another means that plants or certain living things are able to make their own food. So that is a topic for a different discussion. Now, we've discussed producers and why plants and flowers and other grasses are known as producers. But why are these animals known as consumers? As the name suggests, they cannot produce their own food. But what do? They consume other living things as their source of food for energy. So the animals you see on the screen cannot produce their own food using raw carbon dioxide and water and sunlight to produce their food. They can't do that. In order to get energy, they need to depend on other living things. So some consumers depend on only plants for their source of energy. Some depend on other animals or flesh or meat for their source of energy. And there are some other consumers, as for those ones, anything goes. Whether it's a plant-based food or meat or flesh, they are cool. Now, these living things that we've actually discussed, or these consumers that we've actually discussed, to be some that eat flesh, some eat plants, and some eat both. That means we have groups or categories of consumers. For the first category we talk about are known as carnivores. Carnivores are basically consumers that eat only flesh. They eat only meat. So a nickname we can give them is meat eaters. They eat nothing but meat. That is their source of energy. And we have another category that eats nothing but plant-based food. and those living things or those consumers are known as herbivores. So herbivores are consumers that eat only plants. And we have another category known as omnivores. They are consumers that are able to eat both plants and flesh or meat. So they eat anything. So they are known as omnivores. So now that we actually understand producers and consumers and the types of consumers that we have, that brings us to our next point, food chain. What exactly is food chain? Well, before we define food chain, let's go back a little to recap something we said earlier. We said plants are able to make their own food using carbon dioxide and water with the help of sunlight to convert these raw materials into glucose or sugar. Now here's the point. The glucose or sugar that plants are able to produce by means of photosynthesis are eaten or taken by herbivores or omnivores. So here's the point. Plants make their own food by means of photosynthesis, and at the end, they produce sugar or glucose. Animals then depend on this plant as source of energy. So if you look at your screen at the moment, you see a deer over there seriously eating some grasses. It's feeding on the grass to gain energy. But how did the grass get the energy before the deer is feeding on it? It got the energy by means of photosynthesis. So without photosynthesis, the deer will not find its source of energy because the plant is not able to photosynthesize. Glucose or sugar will be produced and herbivores cannot feed on them. Now, we have another kind of animals that feed on flesh, or they are known as the meat eaters. Let's move to our next slide and get that point clear out. So here's the point. We have the plant out there, uses photosynthesis to produce glucose or sugar. Then a deer goes to eat the grass or the plant and gets energy from the grass or the plant. After it has gotten energy, what happens? A lion then comes to feed on the deer. So look at this. There is energy that is locked up in the sun by means of photosynthesis. Plants are able to convert water and carbon dioxide into glucose. Then herbivores feed on the plants or the grass, and carnivores come to feed on the herbivores. So this flow of energy from one living thing to another is what you are referring to as a food chain. So a food chain basically illustrates the flow of energy or nutrients from one organism to another. So to illustrate what we've just explained right now is what we have here. We have energy in the grass is being transferred to the deer as the deer eats the grass. Then the deer gets the energy from the grass, and then that energy is transferred to the lion when the lion feeds on the deer. As simple as that. And take note of the arrowhead. The direction of the arrow is so important. You can see that the arrowhead is pointing from the grass to the deer and not from the deer to the grass. What does that mean, or how is that so important? The direction of the arrow tells us the direction in which the energy is being transferred. So if we look currently, we have grass to deer to lion, and the arrowhead is pointing towards deer from the grass, and from the deer, the arrowhead is pointing towards lion. This is what I mean. We have energy in the grass, and the energy is being transferred to the deer, and energy from the deer is transferred to the lion. But in case, or imagine we turn the arrowhead the other way around, and then the arrowhead moves from the lion to the deer, and from the deer to the grass. What that will mean is that energy from the lion is being transferred to the deer, or in other words, the deer eats the lion and the grass eats the deer. And that's not how it's supposed to B. So let's pay very close attention to the direction of the arrowhead. Now let's take some few questions as a recap of what we've actually discussed so far. Now looking at this food chain, why is the grass or the grass plant at the start of the food chain? Why is it at the start of the food chain? The answer is simple. The grass plant produces food for the deer. And by what means? By means of photosynthesis. So the grass plant is so important. So in any food chain, grass plants or plants are so significant. Now our next question is, how does the grass get its food? How does the grass get its food? Well, it gets its food by means of photosynthesis. So the grass uses energy from the sun to make its own food, just like we discussed earlier. And what do the arrows in the food chain show? What do the arrows show? The arrow shows the direction in which energy in the food is passed in the food chain. That is why the arrowhead, the direction of it, where it points, is so important or crucial. We've discussed a lot and we've learned a lot. Now, look at these images of selected animals. You have rabbits, plants, eagle, and rat. So you're actually going to use these animals to answer some questions. You have rabbits, plants, eagle, rats. So for our first question, which of these is a producer? Which of these living things we have on the screen is a producer? The answer is clear as day. It's plant. Because only plants are able to photosynthesize. Rabbits can't, eagles can't, rats cannot. Only plants can. So they are known as producers. Now, what do we call consumers that eat only plants? The answer is clear. Herbivores. And name the two consumers that eat plants. So we have 4 living things here, and 3 of them are consumers. Which of these consumers eats plants? Well, which of them eats plants? We have rabbits. Rabbit eats plants. And we also have rats. Rats also eats plants. And interestingly, rabbits are actually herbivores and rats are omnivores. So rats are omnivores, meaning they are able to eat plant-based food and they are also able to eat flesh, yes, meat. So for the 2 consumers that eat plants, we have rabbits and rats. Now for our next question, which animals are predators? So a little background information. When we say a predator, we have 2 animals. If you remember on our previous slide, we have a deer and a lion. So the lion eats the deer for food. So in this scenario, the lion becomes the predator and the deer becomes the prey. So the prey is the animal that is eaten, and then the predator is the animal that is eating the other animal or eating the prey. So which of these animals we have here is actually or are predators? So we have 2 of them. We have eagle and rat. They can serve as predators. Why? The eagle can actually feed on rabbits and rats. So the rat and rabbits can serve as food for the eagle. And for the rat also, it can eat or feed on the flesh of what? Of the rabbits. So let's keep that in mind. Now we have some food chains that have actually been mixed up for us. And let's see if our little understanding of food chain can actually help us to reorder these food chains into their proper order. Let's see if we'll be able to reorder them. And take note of this. We said earlier that the direction of the arrowhead is so important. So what does this food chain mean? We have bird to caterpillar to leaf. Look at the arrowhead where it's pointing. It's pointing from bird to caterpillar and from caterpillar to leaf. So if you have to explain this food chain, it means there is energy in the bird and caterpillar eats the bird to get that energy. And then there is energy in the caterpillar. The leaf eats the caterpillar to get that energy. We know that doesn't actually happen in nature. So that means this is a wrong order of the food chain. So what is the right order? This. We have leaf to caterpillar to bird. So that means the leaf has a certain energy stored in it after photosynthesis. Then caterpillar feeds on the leaf and gets that energy, and bird feed on the caterpillar to get the energy from the caterpillar. Now for our next food chain that has been mixed up, we have lizard to corn to cat to locust. What does that mean? Simple, right? It means lizard has energy stored in it, and corn eats the lizard to get the energy. And then cat eats corn to get energy from the corn, and locust eats cat. That's what the food chain is saying. If you look at the direction of the arrowhead, this is obviously wrong because it doesn't happen in nature. So what's the right order? Have a look at this. We have corn to locust to lizard to cat, and this makes complete sense because the corn in this scenario is a producer. Then the locust feed on the leaf of the corn. And what happens to the locust after it has gotten the energy? Lizard is able to feed on the locust and gets that energy from it. And then the cat comes in and grabs the lizard for food and gets that energy for itself. So this is basically the right order with this food chain is supposed to be. Let's move on to our next jumbled food chain. We have melon to eagle to snake to mouse. Yes, it doesn't make sense. That means eagles eat melon. And look at the end. We have a mouse at the end. Mouse eating snakes? It doesn't make sense. A mouse doesn't actually eat snakes. So this food chain is wrong. So what's the right order? You just have to change the position of the mouse and the eagle. So you have melon, which is a producer. Mouse actually feeds on the melon and gets energy. So imagine the mouse wakes up in the morning and trying to look for its meal early morning. Breakfast. There grabs the melon, full belly after eating the melon. But right after eating the melon, the snake also searching for its breakfast finds the mouse and feeds on it and gets that energy from the mouse. So the mouse gets the energy from the melon. The snake scans for that energy. Does it end there? No. The eagle fly also sees the snake and picks it up and gets the energy from the snake. So that's basically what happens in nature. But keep this in mind. There's a different concept known as food web. Food web. It is food web that actually exists in nature. A food web is basically a network of food chains. So that is a topic for a different lesson. So keep this in mind. We really need this kind of relationship to exist in nature to have a balanced ecosystem. So the next time you see a snake eating a mouse or an eagle picking up a snake, know that we need this kind of relationship to have a balanced ecosystem. So thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. If you actually learned something useful and find this lesson interesting, give it a thumbs up. See you in our next lesson.